My name's Dave DeBow, founder of MoneyPartnerFormula.com, and this show is built for everyday real estate investors who are actively doing deals and looking to scale using other people's money. So if you're an active real estate investor and you want to get featured on this show to talk about your own real estate and capital raising experiences, then just go to daveinterviewyou.com. Now let's get rolling with this episode, and remember to subscribe for daily interview content.
All right, guys, welcome to Property Profits Podcast. I'm your host, Bryce Kaminsky, filling in for Dave Dubo. And have you ever wondered how a professional baseball scout transitioned into creating generational wealth through real estate? Well, today, my guest, Adam, I'm going to take a shot at it. Czajkowski.
Yeah, close enough. Czajkowski. Yeah, a lot easier than
the ZZ is throwing me out. From the heart of the Midwest is here to unravel his journey from baseball field to the world of multifamily real estate investing. Adam, welcome to the show. Great to have you here.
Bryce, yeah, thanks, man. I really appreciate it. Privileged to be on here. So excited.
Yeah, that the last name threw me for a curveball, but I'm sure you're used to that. So
pun intended.
Yeah. Can you share a little bit more about your background as a professional baseball scout, and then what kind of led you into transitioning into real estate investing?
Sure. So born and raised in like the Massachusetts area, and yeah, baseball is kind of just a passion growing up. Played it, coached, did all different things, and when you get to that age of high school, college, everyone's asking what do you want to do with yourself, and I wasn't really sure. I knew baseball was a passion. Was there kind of coming to the realization wasn't going to be a profession being a player, but there's other avenues in there. So I knew I kind of wanted to work at the highest level possible. So professional level it was. Didn't really play past high school. Didn't have much of a background doing it. So it was one of those kind of crazy ideas that I decided to go for it. I wrote letters, tried to connect with as many people as possible. Did a couple non-paid internships to get my foot in the door, and yeah, just luck of the draw. Sometimes those opportunities just come with timing and luck sometimes, and ended up with the New York Yankees back in 2009. I started with their player development department and located in Tampa. Was there for about 4 years and then transitioned into the scouting world, covered North and South Carolina region. And then, I love doing it, but it's funny how it happens is just come to the realization of, geez, what do I want to do the rest of my life? You hear so many stories of these guys who dedicate your life to doing this sport. It's kind of a thankless job. And, you hear so many stories of guys missing their kids' graduation, all these events. And it's like, do you really want that to be you one day? Mm-hmm. So kind of had my 30th birthday, almost like a midlife, quarter life crisis, whatever it may be, to transition out, decide to get out, got into sales and business world. And, hey, it's great for the work-life balance, making more money, all these great things. But, at the same time too, I also knew that from my love of working in baseball, I didn't want to keep working for somebody, because I went from not having to work or not feeling like I worked to now I have to punch the clock 9 to 5. So there's some trade-off. And then, 2020 hits, the world shuts down. I'm sales, so I'm commission-based. So pretty much all my income just plummets, just like the world came to a halt that day. And, I said, I never want that to happen again. I want to build something where I don't have to rely on other people or a job to keep me going. So during that time, obviously I had a lot of free time, just started learning about real estate, and people had always joked that saying that would be something you might go into, you might have interest in. And yeah, just started picking up stuff, found bigger pockets online, obviously a very prominent real estate source, ordered as many books as I could, just learned podcasts. We're at an age where, we're fortunate. You have a lot of information at your hands. So, just learn that way and started saving for the first investment property in 2021. Bought a short-term rental in Cape Cod, which is, a pretty highly desirable tourist area in Massachusetts. It was local, wasn't too far. Did it conventionally, found it on market, used a realtor for that. And then that was the first one. And then, we've grown to a few in the portfolio now, have 3. but I wanted to scale faster. So, I started to research, how can we do this? And, came across Bigger Pockets, episode they had with Brandon Turner, and he interviewed a guy named Pace Morby.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure you're familiar with, you hear all this creative
Mm-hmm.
real estate, creative financing, sub two. And it's, he's talking about getting into real estate without cash, without credit, without down payments. And it's one of those things you're like, geez, it just sounds too good to be true. So did the research there, ended up, studying that for a good portion of a year, just, to really immerse myself in it, and took a dive to join the mentorship. And, I've been doing that for the past year. And, it's been a real slow climactic, thing for me to get to where I am now. It's,
Mm-hmm.
meeting as many people as possible, connecting, as they always say, your net worth is your network.
Mm-hmm.
So, and for this past year, I can really see that starting to come to fruition now. So yeah, that brings me here. And, so now we're focusing on multifamily, in the Louisville, Kentucky area. My partner I met, we just clicked. We ended up meeting last year at BPCon in Florida, and it was just funny how we met. We're both in the mentorship, and um, we were at one of the sessions in BPCon, and we were sitting kind of like 2 or 3 seats away from each other. And there's this woman behind us that we also connected with through the mentorship, and I recognized her, he recognized her. So we were like, oh, geez, we're meeting her in person. And then him and I connected, and just kind of a interesting story how that can kind of unfold. You never know who you're going to meet.
Yeah, and especially with Pace Morby's community is really um tight knit. I'm not in as part of their community, but I interview quite a few of whether it's a connector or like someone with a Gator team or someone
Mm-hmm.
who's in part of that. Definitely that community seems to like gravitate to working with each other. It's kind of like church. If you don't believe about sub two, you don't believe that it can be done. Well, you probably aren't in the community, because the people who are inside believe it, and it kind of self propels in that sense where
Right.
um they're like supporting each other, and you kind of have to in that sort of space, because creative financing, either you believe it can be done or you're just shaking your head, you're like, nah, you can't do that. So there's kind of like those two things. So tell me a little bit about, like, how did your experience in baseball scouting kind of shape your approach to real estate investing? Because they seem
Yeah.
on the surface kind of like the same thing. Like, I'm looking for properties, I'm looking for people.
Yeah, it was a lot of it translates, to business, to sales, to real estate investing. Um, so for instance, you have a territory, that's the area that you cover as a scout. You're responsible for identifying talent in those areas, translating it to your organization.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same for real estate. You pick your market, you pick your niche. For me, it became multifamily. It became Louisville, Kentucky because of my partner. So now you start diving into, okay, now let's try and search for these properties or these players.
Mm-hmm.
When if you're a good scout, just like a good real estate investor, you're using all the resources available. You know, can you find deals off market? Absolutely. On market, brokers, there's so many ways to generate those leads, wholesalers. So I think if you're a savvy and kind of aggressive real estate investor, you're not going to leave any stone unturned. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the same with scouting. You hear players' names, a coach talks to you about someone, don't go into it think, oh no, it's not a deal, it's not a player. Listen, you never know. Even if it
Yeah.
isn't, it's just
Check it
it's
out.
interesting how some of these things unravel and who you meet and how you get connected with people sometimes.
So why Louisville, Kentucky? The market specifically for your multifamily investments.
Yeah, so part of it was the partner I met. His name's Tim. He's actually been on Bigger Pockets as well. He's doing some really good things down there. And again, it was a good collaboration. Just you had a good feeling. We developed a good friendship, and that kind of that transpired into a partnership. He was local to Louisville. He's talking to me about the market. How it's pretty stable. There's some up and coming markets. There's job growth, and it's also one of those markets where, unlike Boston or Dallas or New York, it's not, the cost of the properties isn't ridiculous. Up here, in Massachusetts, you may get into a duplex or a triplex for $600,000, 700,000.
Yeah.
Whereas down there in Louisville, you might be able to get into like a 11 or 12 unit multifamily property.
Yeah. So like the ROI on the exchange is a lot better. So you're mostly looking for like B and C class buildings somewhere in the 10 to 50 unit. Um, can you elaborate a little bit on your criteria that you're looking for as far as multifamily is concerned?
Sure. Yeah. Again, it goes back to like B and C where we can, maybe have some value add, um, some core plus type opportunities. Maybe there's a loss to lease opportunity right now. Um, you start to get all this criteria like you learn with real estate. Maybe it's a tired landlord. It's in great condition, it's free and clear. This owner's had it for 15, 20 years. They just kind of let it go by the wayside. Maybe bad property management, maybe they're not paying attention to it. So immediately there's ways to come in and immediately stabilize to raise the rents, to grow that profit right away with really not doing much. Um, or maybe there's some cosmetic rehab. You come in, try and get that done within 12 to 18 months, refi out. Um, definitely ways to get creative, add value, raise rents, increase revenue, at the same time looking for opportunities where maybe they've let the expenses also kind of get out of control.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this property is running at like 65 to 70% expense ratio to the income. And, you look at that as, okay, what areas do we think we can add value here, reduce these expenses? Because those are some pretty quick and easy ways, if you know what you're looking at, what you're doing, to really create some cash flow and get a good spread between that revenue and, the expenses.
Yeah. And there's some people too, like I'm finding more and more that in the multifamily space, people would rather take over a relatively stabilized building with value add rather than redoing an entire building and putting new tenants in, like really gutting it, so to speak, on the multifamily side. So where do you guys sit on that whole thing?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, me and my partner have discussions about this I think you really have to be good with the numbers at that point. I think the margin for error becomes, a little bit tighter just because you really have to account for cost of materials, the vacancy at that point. Um, how long is it going to take? As we know, you get a contractor comes in and says 12 to 18 months, we know it's probably not going to be that,
Mm-hmm.
every rehab job is going to come with extra time, the holding costs. As we saw in like 21 and 22, if you hold it too long and those rates change drastically, you might be
Before you
left.
get locked in, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot you really have to consider and account for, I think, in your plans. So I think we're very careful on those right now. We're not shying away from them. We'll definitely look at those deals, but yeah, we're looking for, ways where we can come in, add that value relatively easy without, doing a full demo or renovation where it's going to take, that occupancy away for the next 12 to 18 months. Um, the reason we also chose that size was just because, you're dealing with a lot more kind of mom and pop owners. We're not having to deal with hedge funds. We're not having to deal with these institutional investors. Um, and we don't get to a point where, we have to worry about really syndicating it at that point. Some of these deals, if we can get creative with them, we can, structure them in a way where, it's as little to no money out of our pockets. And we're also trying to give a situation that works very well for the seller as well.
Yeah. So when it comes to, real estate investing, integrity and character are essential, when working with business partners and
Mhm.
other stakeholders. Can you discuss a challenge you faced in regards to that and maybe how you navigated that?
Yeah, thankfully, I haven't really encountered that in real estate yet. I feel, I've worked with partners before. I've worked with, um, businesses before where you kind of develop, a feel for it. And again, you just never know at the end of the day. I know people in, realty groups that, have partnered and become best friends with somebody just to have them backstab them, 3 or 4 years down the road, and they could never predict that. Um, I think a lot of it comes down to emotional intelligence where, we want to be so mad at that person for taking advantage of us, but in reality, we have to come to the realization that that's on you as well. You let that person in, you kind of gave them the credit. You didn't, protect yourself, even if it's your best friend of 20 years with a JV agreement or the
Mhm.
contracts in place. Business gets very tough. It can really straddle some delicate lines, especially when you're talking about friendships, families. I mean, they can really break people apart. So I think to prevent that, having very clear communication, having contracts in place, and when you are JVing or partnering with somebody, have very clear line, descriptions of what each person is going to be doing, and
Mhm.
hold everyone accountable. So I think if you get on that conversation, you get on the same page, you can mitigate that risk as much as possible. But, at the end of the day, it can be a learning lesson, and, kind of keep that emotional intelligence, I think, is a big, big thing with dealing with anything in business.
That and having the paperwork, like you said, have the
Oh
paperwork.
yeah, absolutely. I always have the paperwork.
So what's one key lesson you've learned through real estate investing journey that maybe you wish you knew when you started?
Yeah, it's one of those things I look back, I'm like, geez, I wish I knew 10, 15 years ago. Um, I think the biggest lesson I've learned is just like with anything, like it's a grind. It's a roller coaster. It's the success is always that tip of the iceberg, right? Anyone we're seeing who's doing very well in real estate, we only see the tip. We don't see everything below that. The the long hours at night, the going through 20 deals just to be told no on every single one,
Mhm.
having to pivot and change your market, or having to adjust with, the landscape of everything else going on that's out of your control. I think that's really helped me as I've gotten older, because I feel like when I was younger, that would have been a challenge, just because it's hard to deal with. It's hard to deal with when, you've underwritten 2 dozen deals,
Mhm.
and then of those 2 dozen, maybe only 3 or 4 actually work and we can maybe make deals. Then you're pitching those deals to the realtor or the broker or the seller. And, now you're trying to get on a conversation of reframing their mindset and their thought process, just to have all those fall through. And now you're back at square one. So I think it's always frustrating to go through. And I think something I would tell myself early on and continue to keep telling myself is, trust the process, keep grinding, consistency and persistence, keep at it. It starts to build
Mhm.
up.
So what are your future plans and goals for real estate investing? Are there any, new markets or strategies you guys are considering these days?
Yeah, I mean, aside from the multifamily, my partner and I have kind of talked about what our goals are, what our future goals are. I would still like to grow, short-term rental portfolio. I definitely like that market. I like it. I've managed it before. Um, definitely stay in the multifamily, maybe grow to the, larger multifamily where we're talking more syndications, big capital partners, we're talking like 100+ units. Um, affordable housing has always been very interesting. I think part of this, is to doing real estate is to, obviously for me, selfishly, is to create generational wealth, not have to work a W-2, leave something to my family one day, but also to, to be able to maybe help people in other ways. Um, whether that's create more affordable housing. My background in the past 6 years has been commercial credit, so I understand how kind of credit works, maybe help people who are challenged with their personal credit to help them understand things like that. So any way to give back to, so that anyone can see that, if this person can own, millions of dollars in real estate one day, why can't I do it?
Yeah. Just letting people see that it's possible. I think that's one thing that's really interesting about the podcast for me too, is I get on these calls and I talk to these people, and before, and it's probably the same for you, is like before you see someone say, oh yeah, I got like 1,500 units in Ohio, and you're like multifamily, they're like, no, just houses, and you're like, okay. So that's something someone could do, is, have 1,500 single family houses all over Ohio and be, creating that sort of generational wealth. So just being exposed to that, I think is, really important. So when you got all this stuff going on in real estate and especially with the scouting stuff, what would you say your unfair advantage is? What comes easy to you that other people might find difficult to do?
I think from, being in it, I think the sales side,
Hmm.
and I wouldn't say that's an easy thing because you look back and you think I've been doing sales for 10 years now since I left baseball. And yeah, it's starting to become more easy, but that's just because I've put the time in. I've tried to, refine that trade. And it really is something you have to refine and get better at and always learn. So I feel like I have kind of a leg up there just because, I've learned to know how to talk to people, have those discussions where, I don't have a problem making a cold call, and that's what it is when you're doing real estate. Even though we're buying the properties, we're still
Hmm.
selling ourselves. We're selling, like
Yeah.
to what you said earlier, it all comes down to credibility, integrity. So I need to make sure that I'm acting that way, but also I know how to sell myself that way. That, listen, if you're trusting us to buy your property creatively, or I'm building a relationship with a broker or agent, they need to know I'm a serious buyer. They need to know
Yeah.
that I have the credibility, the resources, the accountability to come in and buy your property.
Hmm.
So I think that can be a tough thing to do. So someone who's maybe new, um, who never has had like a sales background, or maybe they're more introverted, I think that can be challenging for someone to come in and just start doing real estate, because it's like, okay, it's tough enough as it is trying to figure out your market,
Yeah.
what niche you want to get into. Now it's like, now I have to talk to realtors, I have to talk to wholesalers, sellers, like, and you have
Hmm.
to talk to them all very differently because their goals are different too. So that it can be challenging.
Yeah. That's one thing is, um, call centers for me were a big thing that got me over that. I would take 100 something inbound calls in an 8-hour shift. And um, there was a point I remember I was working on the chat support side where everyone who was hired there was hired to like do the email support. So people would come in and they would chat back and forth, and it was a sales job. And I was the only person of the like, I think it was like 40 or 50 of us who would, if the chat dropped, I would just call them. I'd be like, oh, I'll just call them and finish the sale. And
Mhm.
everyone's like, you can do that? It's like, yeah, I have no problem like getting on the phone. I just spent 3 years taking inbound phone calls, 100 a day. But these people were coming, who were hired in as brand new to this tech support framework. They never had even been on the phone. So they were always hiding behind the computer and just doing that side. So, that exposure to actually like, oh, just, you mean get on the phone and finish the sale? And oh,
Sure.
and look at that, I'm in the top three again this month because I have an unfair advantage. Well, what, getting on the phone? So, you talked about generational wealth. How do you envision this real estate thing really building that for your family?
Yeah, I mean, I think by doing that, it's going to give us some diversity. It gives us more control. We're at a point where, it's not like what it was when our parents were working. They were taught to work a 9 to 5 for the next 40 years of your life. You know, you'll rise up the chain, you'll get promoted. Companies had pensions, you had your 401k, and that worked for a lot of them, once they got to the retirement age. But as the economy's changed, as everything's developed, even especially with the cost of housing, it just hasn't kept up with, the cost of living versus, how much people are making, inflation of, consumer products. So I wanted to create something that I know has always had a great track record. That's something that's always you can really count on to appreciate, something that really isn't going to go anywhere. It's not a fad. It's been
Mhm.
here for, hundreds of years, as long as people have been building homes. Um, I wanted to create, something that you can grow quickly, but keep it stable, keep it for a long term. You're not going to lose it all in one trade, or, just one deal, and also kind of like the stock market, diversify, not just focus on multifamily, you have short-term rentals, affordable housing. I mean, there's so many interesting things that are going on in real estate you hear that are very cool. Assisted living is very hot now. CAD splits, all these interesting real estate topics. And,
Yeah.
if you look at what's going on in the US, I mean, it's still a shortage of houses, shortage of housing. I mean, that's not going away anytime soon.
Well, I guess it depends. Like you can say, there's a shortage of housing where people want to live. I'm sure there's a
Yeah,
few houses in the Midwest where like the flyover states where there's a few empty houses for people, but
sure.
they want to be on either the East Coast or the West Coast, and the middle is kind of like, yeah, but there's not enough houses in California. Okay. Maybe California is not for you, like maybe you
Maybe you
need
have
to
to
go a little
look,
bit more
yeah,
east.
change your market a little bit.
Yeah, go a little bit north and go a little bit of east, and I bet you find some housing. So, um, if people want to connect with you, they want to find out more about your business, possibly to get partnered or invest with you guys, what should they do? How do they find you?
Yeah, Instagram's probably the best way to reach us. My Instagram handle is there, Scouting for Wealth, which kind of plays into my past, but it's been interesting how that's translated to real estate, as we talked about. So yeah, feel free to reach out there. I'm always happy to answer questions just because, I look back and I've only been really doing this for a few years. So I remember how tough it was getting going, just where to begin, how to network with people, all these things I was used to, but it's just, it's a totally different world. It's just understanding, that kind of real estate world and putting yourself out there. And I think, I always tell people getting into it, you got to be ready to get comfortable with being uncomfortable
Hmm.
with anything new
Growing,
you do.
growing at you're at a breakneck speed. You're not sure where it's going to go because you can scale very quickly, especially in the sub two side of things. Like
Yeah.
you could be up 20 properties in 30 days if you can put the deal together, and I thought it was
Sure.
interesting when you said about the accountability and integrity because that's you're essentially assuming their position in that mortgage, and so if you're not for real, you might actually do some damage to these people's property and their ownership of these things. So you do have to be on the up and up. So I really appreciate your insights tonight.
Yeah, no, 100%. Because at the end of the day, your reputation's everything. And, this is a small world in a sense because, to me, if you default on a loan, you don't follow through, you're taking people's money, that's
Yeah.
going to get around pretty quick. And, someone might be able to get away with that on one or two deals, but that's going to get around quick. And, your time in real estate is going to be pretty much over. No one's going to want to work with you. And, at the end of the day, just, you act with integrity and do all those little things right, you'll meet the right people, you'll be put in the right rooms, and it'll start to fall in place.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I really appreciate you stopping by, and until next time, guys, we'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks, Bryce.
Hey there, I really hope you enjoyed that episode. And as always, if you want to listen to more daily interview content, make sure you subscribe. And if you're an active real estate investor and you're doing deals and you'd like to get featured on this show, then just head over to daveinterviewyou.com. Now at moneypartnerformula.com, we help real estate investors to create a process for predictably getting capital so they can do more deals without relying on hard money lenders or the banks. We do this by building them a private capital marketing system. Now, if you want help turning yourself into a big money capital attraction machine, then book a call with our team to see how we can help. Just visit moneypartnerformula.com to find out more. All right, take care, and we'll see you on the next interview.